Hi, everybody. Craig Shacklett here from URComped with another edition of the Casino Innovators Show. We've got two guests today, two very special guests to talk about all things AI. We have got Juan Romero, repeat guest from Volante Software, and we have Stasi Baran from NQube. And first of all, both of you, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Craig. Appreciate it.
All right, and so why don't we start with Stasi, because Stasi, you've been working in AI for a long time now. A lot of people, I think about AI just with ChatGPT, like, type in a prompt and all of a sudden it spits out a little book or a story or something. But there's more than just that kind of AI. Maybe why don't you start off by telling us, kind of break down AI for us and the different applications.
Sure, absolutely. That's a really big question, but I'll try to boil it down for aspects that are particularly relevant to the casino industry. So AI really became a hot topic, as you said, when ChatGPT was released. Everybody started to see its power. At NQube, we've really been bringing AI to gaming since about 2016 now. So there were certainly AI possibilities and AI options before ChatGPT was even around. So, I mean, basically, ChatGPT is cool. Don't get me wrong, but we're in a very mathy industry. I mean, everything we do is numbers. So a tool like ChatGPT that's primarily focused on language, while there are capabilities that it can help us with, it's not necessarily the right tool for every casino application. So I think that for casino applications, things like neural networks, for example, are very appropriate. So neural networks allow us to, perform predictive analytics, forecasting, things like that. They basically learn in a similar way as the human brain does, but in their case, it learns from data. Rather than taking in visual inputs like a human might and thinking through problems. And you really see it in financial forecasting, for example, is a very popular application. ChatGPT is actually based on a neural network fundamentally. Security systems, a lot of what they do is based on AI. So there's computer vision in there. There's also fundamental neural networks analyzing player behavior, whether that be, just how players behave on slot machines, or perhaps, if they're behaving in a nefarious way, anti-money laundering. There's a lot of AI applications just determining what types of behavioral patterns might be indicative of certain behaviors. So there's a lot of applications of AI on that front. The type of AI that we do at NQube is a little bit different. It's based on evolutionary computing. Basically what that means, it's an AI that does a lot of searching, and it does so in a way similar to how beings have evolved. So when we apply that to casinos, if we're thinking about a casino slot floor, so this was our primary application when we entered the gaming space, we searched through millions of different slot floors using our artificial intelligence to ultimately determine what's the best configuration of your slot floor. So we're telling operators, which machines to buy, which ones to retire, where to put them on their floor. But that happens after a huge process of matching segmented machines to segmented players and determining, what is the best content for this floor. And that AI is searching through millions of different floors in order to do that. And that's actually, 1 million sounds like a big number, but that's actually not what's super cool about what we're doing. 1 million is actually a really small number. And part of the efficiency of the AI is that it's able to break down the problem in a way where it's not out there searching for far out slot floors. It's figured out where that region of optimal floors exists. And when it's searching through it, it's doing so extremely efficiently. And eventually we figure out, okay, well, here's what you should put on your floor in order to optimize revenue.
Thank you. Okay, and so you talked about matching segmented players with segmented machines. And how does the AI do that? How does it decide what machines to lump together and what players to lump together?
Yeah, so I mean, fundamentally, it's really about, again, that searching. In the sense of segmenting slot machines, it's discovering rules about the slot machines by taking in data. And I guess, like, at a fundamental level, what you're asking is, how is it doing that? Well, it's doing it because we have so much data. in the casino industry. There's really no AI without data. AI requires huge numbers of just like massive data sets. So when we're segmenting or when we're optimizing slot floors, we're taking in, detailed session level data, like up to 15-minute, half-hour resolution that can go back up to 5 years. So there's a ton of data that's going into this, and AIs are data hungry. So the segmentation AI is searching through all that data, and it's determining on the slot machine side, what is it about this machine that players are responding to? So when a player is playing a machine, what's attractive about that machine to a player? So you've got these machine info files that are coming off of the slot management system, these huge slot master files, and they have all the information about the machines in them, whether that's, it's the denom, it's the theme, it's the number of reels, the volatility, all that information is available. And what is it about the machine that the players are responding to? Well, when the AI searches through that, sometimes it's saying, well, for this particular machine, the player likes that it's a dragon theme. They like that it has a denom of $5. They like that, the volatility is really high. And it's extracting those features. And on the other side, so there's all these players, and they're moving around your slot floor playing different content. And it's also determining, well, what will this player play? And do you have enough of it? So when it recommends content and understands the players, and it knows, well, this machine, you don't have enough of it on the floor. On busy nights, you have players that are searching for this machine, and they're either playing less profitable slot machines or they're going home.
Now you mentioned, and this is a good time to bring in Juan, because you mentioned that AI is data hungry. The more data that you have about the slot floor, the better the AI does. And so Juan, maybe you could talk a little bit about Volante and kind of why you and NQube are teaming up to really augment the AI and come out with a new product, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the whole thing is, it's kind of what Stacey just talked about, right? Is on the slot track side of things, particularly on the slot file, we're collecting all of this information and all these data points with regard to the configuration of a game, right? And so traditionally, you have these analysts or you have these, slot operations people that are looking at all these different variables, and they're basically processing this information from an analytical standpoint through a series of dashboards or whatever the case may be. But what I found is all that is great, and every single time we put one set of dashboards out, they can ask me for 20 or 30 more, right? And we can continue to do that for the rest of the time. So where really we wanted to look for a partner and someone like NQube, and fortunately we found them actually through you. So thank you for the introduction. Was, how can we do some of this, analyzing, and how can we make decisions on this extremely large set of data that, we collected and that we put so much effort into putting it into a manner that we can dissect without throwing 50 analysts at it, right? Or without getting to the point where it's like, where do you stop? You know what I mean? And so I think a lot of it is, how can we get down to the fundamental, kind of, like Stacey said, is like, what is driving people to play? What are the 5, 6, 7 things that are most important to them about that cabinet and about that makeup? How do we process that data as effectively as we can? And then how can we make decisions about, diminishing returns? Because Stacey said X amount of product, right? So, I go to somebody like my buddy James out of DD and go, your top players are playing games that fit this particular profile. Well, that's awesome. He can't just keep adding that, that product to the game without diluting something else, whether it's the player's attention or cannibalizing it from another section of the floor. And so one of the big things is how do we get this information? How do we process and analyze it? And then how do we take actionable, steps in that direction with this being cost effective, right? And so the biggest thing that I'm seeing in the industry is, I don't know, and it's just like any other big thing, right? In the gaming industry is this thing is out there now, and I don't think conventional industry has really figured out what to do, particularly with AI outside of saying the 2 words, right? Once they say the words, the stock shoots up, everybody wants to hear it, but I don't know that they really honed in on what it is exactly that they want to do with it. And so when we started talking to NQube, it was let's start with the lowest, most focused kind of problem that we know, which for us was the cost of, total machine ownership through parts, right? If we can predict when parts are going to break, and we can tell you what your par level should be, and we can tell you how many parts you should have on hand, that's a real practical solution for something that NQube brings to the table. And if they can do that without throwing 12 people to try and find the answer, as a full-time job, that's exactly what we were shooting for and working on as we speak.
Yeah, just to reiterate for folks, just to really highlight what a good match this is, because you've got Volante and Slot Track, which is really helping slot floor operations. You just have an enormous amount of data that the people you work with in the biggest casinos in the country are really in North America are like, all right, it's all in here. Can you help us make sense of this? And then you have NQube that has this amazing AI engine. But I imagine the hardest part about onboarding a new customer is probably categorizing all the data and making it so that you can bring it into your system and start getting insights from it, right? Because I imagine every casino is tags things differently or don't tag things at all. And if the data is all a mess, you're going to have to spend a lot of time up front getting it in a way that your machine can then give insights. So anyway, it just seems like a perfect match. And so maybe Juan, you touched on like the first use case is collecting data on parts and how quickly parts are going out, and predicting when new parts need to be ordered and maximizing profit, not just from top line revenue, but like how much repair work is going into the machines.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you guys can tease what, and either one of you can go first, but what's another use case that you're looking forward to with Alex, which is the name of the tool that you guys are working on together?
You mentioned it earlier with Slot Track. We're collecting so much information, all with the game as a centralized piece, right? Whether that's mill log entries, progressive readings, and progressive information, whether it's the game information or inventory, contract information. Now we're moving more into the process side of things. So what's interesting is most people even now put Slot Track in for efficiency, right? So it's like, how do we get out of paper and just do this process efficiently? And now working with people like Stasi and Jason out at NQube, it's like, okay, we're efficient now. That's cool. We were able to kind of put this together and really categorize and normalize a lot of this data. But to me, the real treasure is how do we make decisions off of this data, right? And so there's a multitude of use cases, right? I mean, when you start looking at combining different things, like you're looking at what Stasi was talking about earlier, was we can do predictive analytics or predictive learning on when particular parts of a cabinet are going to break based on the amount of session time that those games have. So not only is it saying, can I say we're tracking the contracts and the capital outlay for these games, and this is how much they're opened through machine or through mill log entries, and this is X, Y, and this is how many preventive maintenances you have undertaken under this period of time. We can comb all that data together and go, all right, this is this cabinet number. If you open it this much, and this is how much it gets played, which we can deduce based on what NQube is doing, you can expect the bill validator to break potentially in the next 180 days. And if you do preventative maintenance 3 times instead of twice, you can push that out another 70 days or whatever the case may be. So it's really examining the relationships between all of those various touch points, and then using the horsepower of the machine learning to really provide insights that are quote unquote interesting that the normal eye would miss, or tons of labor would be attributed to even recognize.
I love that description. And, what you're describing is really a completely new way for us to look at the data as well, because typically we've been looking at, detailed session data, slot master files, maybe other gaming amenities on the floor, but the maintenance data was invisible to us before. And having that now is it's a completely different angle for the system to look at, because what does it mean for how many machines you should have on the floor of a particular type when they're failing at a certain rate? And understanding how they're failing and how that's propagating through the player base when their machines are available is incredibly important. And it's really adding, that extra layer of power onto, how do you make sure that your floor is the most profitable? So I love how that extra data, it just captures statistically what's happening on your floor in a great amount of detail. And, we really have Volante to thank for that. It's just, It's fantastic data. I think that it's a bit of an aside. I think that casinos are really hard on themselves for the kind of data that they have. It's
Yeah.
fabulous. It's so good compared to any other industry that I've
Mhm.
worked in. The quality is so high. So it's a great industry to work in.
So that's one of the things, right? I mean, because we're so compliance heavy in the industry, it leads to what Stacy's talking about, right? The thing that I've noticed is they're hard on themselves because it's not in a centralized location, right? And so a lot of times they all have this data. It might be in an Access database. It might be in a home cooked system. It might be in SQL or spreadsheets or paper. They have it somewhere in some medium. The thing is, it's not easy to get to, right? And that's where I think people like kind of throw their hands up sometimes, is like even the thought of attacking that and combining all that data and normalizing it's a heck of a commitment from an organization, both from a labor standpoint and from a capital standpoint, to even make that a possibility. But to me, it's like one of the next huge things. Like when you're talking about practical application for this buzzword of AI that everyone's throwing around right now, is like, yeah, it's cool. And yeah, it's cool if it could do X, Y, Z. What does that mean, brass tacks? Right. And I think that's what's really exciting about, what we're working on with Stacy and them, is like, here's a set of variables. We're going to start real, honed in, and then eventually be able to kind of branch out from there.
And so just to boil it down, so somebody, and I'm obviously you're developing more and more use cases, but let's say this is a year from now and you've got the first 3 developed. How are casinos saving money, making more money with Alex and with this AI use case?
I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward, right? You're looking at things you've never even looked for before. That's the first thing, right? So right now you're making decisions on what we know. This is the new frontier. So to me, I can't fully articulate what that may look like, but I mean, to me, having more avenues and more information to potentially make a decision on is the first thing. But the second is, it didn't take, a team of 10 people to even be able to present that to me, right? And to Stacy's kind of expertise, there is when that model is combing through, it's looking for interesting things that me and you don't have to discern from the beginning, right? Because Craig would have to come to me and be like, hey, what would be interesting is if we looked at section AA on Wednesdays with our highest tiered floor on non-leap years or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Where the machine learning might spit that out to you and say, that's interesting. And you go, wow, I never even thought to ask that question, right? And I think that's what trips people up to with like ChatGPT, is you have to ask the question, right? Which, yeah, that can be very powerful if you know what it is that you're looking for, right? And so to me, it's being able to expound and make decisions off of things that we don't even know yet are possibilities. And for instance, if you're a slot director and I can come to you and go, you think you're paying $25,000 for this cabinet, but you're not, because it's going to be out of service X amount of time based on history. It's going to need X amount of capital outlay for parts. It's going to need X amount of PMs and service requests and all that. So there's a labor allotment. Like, that's never even been conceptualized as, let's look at this in terms of total cost of ownership. So that would be my question.
I was just going to add, like, I remember one time, I'd never worked in the slot department. Obviously, we know that, on the marketing side, obviously slots make a lot of money, but you talked about the cost of having a machine out of order, and how if you can predict when something's going to go out and you can get ahead of it and have the part ready, then, what's the value of a game not being out of order for 2 days, right? If it's a profitable game. So that was something that came to mind that I remember in a previous conversation you explained to me that I thought was super interesting as somebody that doesn't work in slots.
Yeah. So when you buy your new car, Craig, that new Bentley that you're always talking about.
Yeah, that's right. The Bentley convertible, the Batman. No, obviously, one's kidding. I wish.
I'm kidding.
Once Alex takes off, I know you'll be driving the Bentley. But...
No. But what's on the sticker of the car window, right? They have all the features. They have the MSRP. But what do they also put in there? They put the maintenance. They put the cost of gas, the cost of oil changes, and in the tiniest writing that you can see, but it is there, right? The casino industry hasn't looked at gaming that way, from a tangible standpoint, where they go, this cabinet costs X amount, but these are the 3 or 4 line items that are going to, play a part in this game being even available.
Yeah, it's a great point because you bringing it back to cars, you hear like a Mercedes might not be that much more, but if you want to get an oil change or to buy, but oil change $500 to change your oil on a Mercedes versus
1,700, buddy.
Yeah.
1,700.
Yeah. So a game, it may look great, it may look about the same price up front, but once you buy it, a lot of casinos may be blindsided by the cost of maintenance or not even really notice how much of a drag it is on the bottom line. But you're able to uncover that data by combining forces.
Absolutely. And further to the predictive analytics part, not only just understanding when that's going to be down, but having the parts on hand, or at the very least being prepared that revenue is not going to look the same if you're experiencing failures. So I like the angle of really being prepared for machine downtime and understanding how that's going to impact the bottom line over time. And bringing it back to the slot floor optimization, in terms of cannibalization, in terms of dilution on your floor, that's an added component that isn't really considered when you're just considering the amount of slot machines on the floor. Maybe you have a whole bank where 20% of the machines are down a lot of the time. Well, that's actually the true number of that machine that you have on the floor, rather than the entire bank. So that's really important to consider when you're thinking about revenue and how that's going to project into the future.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I'd imagine, because I try to map slot floor layout to something I can understand. The closest analogy I could think of is like a restaurant menu where it's like, hey, the burger sells really well, but if you put 20 different versions of a burger on the menu, it's not like you're getting 20 times as much revenue. It's like, there's a saturation point where maybe we want 2 more versions of a burger, but you don't go too much. Otherwise, it's just not going to sell.
Well, and maybe you put the burger with bacon and a certain kind of cheese, which would be the machine configuration, and now it sells 10 times more than it would if you didn't have it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So who's responding to what and when, and even to, you're talking about food. Let's talk about like placement on the menu, right? And the way people discern with like certain boxes and visual things. All of that stuff goes into the slot side of things. Is like, what's the psychology behind that game? So even when I was talking to James out at Desert Diamond, like one of the things that he wants to look at is what are like the non, like configuration aspects of a game in terms of its aesthetic, and even categorizing the types of bonus games that it has and stuff to build his own database of those things as well. So now we go, we look at the holds, we're looking at the denoms, we're looking at the themes, we're looking at all the stuff that Stacey and I are talking about. And in addition, he's going, and it has a curved cabinet that has a bonus where it's interactive in this particular method, and it has these LCD screens. So he wants even to go to like a physical appearance standpoint to see if there's anything there.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Stacey.
Oh, I just Juan said something really interesting earlier. Everything Juan says is very interesting, but there's something in particular something else I wanted to just to comment on was he was talking about finding the simplest problem to tackle first with AI. And I think that's really important because there's a lot of information out there right now. There's a lot of education on AI. AI was, it's just like such a hot topic at conferences. And there's a lot of big picture information that's happening in what's out there. So we're even talking about AI ethics in casinos, which is a huge topic to tackle. But in terms of how operators are going to be using AI right now, I think that's hitting the nail on the head. What is the simplest problem, and how is AI going to help me solve this better? So, taking those steps and understanding, what's the most practical way to implement AI? What's it going to cost me? And ultimately, is this going to be better for the bottom line? That's what I think operators should be looking for right now. I'm a huge advocate for, everybody educating themselves on all things AI and what's happening in the big picture. But it's those small steps that are ultimately going to, drive the industry and get casinos more money.
Well, and to add, Craig, one more thing to what Stacey said is, we saw this with analytics, right? You saw these huge companies that were doing analytics. And when I worked in the casino industry, it was amazing, right? And so you go there and your thought being like, we have all this data, could be presented in all these different types of charts and timelines and all that. But at some point, it's too much, right? And it's like, I have this great time lapse of the floor. And how do I use this? Like, that's a great presentation, right? And so I think that to me is the biggest thing for the industry, is like, how do we get very definable, results? Because even in the conversations that I've had with our customers and with Stasi and her team, was like, how do we take something that's the enormity of what this tool is capable of and make it digestible? And I think that's where that will further the education as well and spur the imagination. Because if we can say, all right, we solved this problem here, and now I can start finding all these other use cases and kind of take the same kind of steps in terms of bringing in the data, pushing it through the model, taking actionable steps over a period of time, measuring those results, refining, so on and so forth. But once we prove it one time, I think it'll be a lot easier to push the envelope in terms of what the thousands of use cases that are out there and capable with a tech like this.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of casino executives that are listening to this, confident the bit to figure out what Alex and you two can do to help them increase profitability and make their slot floor as profitable as possible. So Juan and then Stasi, give your coordinates. How do people find out more about your companies and get a hold of you if they want to?
Smart ladies first. So go ahead, Stasi.
Why, thank you. So you can find me on LinkedIn. My full name is Anastasia Baran. Our company is NQube, NQube. You can go to www.ncube.com, or you can find us on LinkedIn as well.
And I'm on LinkedIn, Juan Romero, and you can visit us at volantesoftware.com or give us a call.
Well, thank you both. I'm so excited. I know Juan and I especially been talking for a while about just the massive potential here. So let's check back in a few months. I know you'll have some exciting customer success stories that we could talk about then. So for the meantime, thank you both so much for coming on.
Thanks for
having us. Appreciate it.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Thank you.